And we are back once again, only on its last call. Last call to the alcohol, only on the lastcallpodcast.com. Joining me here once again, the Senior Bowl is over with. The NFL draft is coming up. We got some Super Bowl this weekend, and I'm bringing in a guy who was at the Senior Bowl, was talking to reporters, talking to scouts, doing his own thing, and he is once again, the thick of everything here. I give you from the draft professors and also from his own Substack. I give you NFL draft analyst Anthony Russo. So, Anthony, first tell us about the Senior Bowl. How was it? How busy? How many people were there? And for those who've never been, what is it like just going there and watching the workouts and trying to get an idea of okay, who's this, who's that, and how good they actually are?
Yeah, Senior Bowl was a good time. I was telling you before we came on, I think really the worst part was once the sun went down. It got very chilly. Definitely we're feeling the Arctic conditions that the rest of the country was feeling. But other than that, no, it was a good time. Drew Fabianich and his team did a great job putting the event together. His first year as director. Um, for those who've never been, it is as football as I think football gets, man. It's 3 days of practices, players doing drills, one-on-ones, then team reps, and it is again just as pure football as it gets, and you really, I think the Senior Bowl even more than the combine is the premier chance for evaluators such as myself, scouts for NFL teams, executives for NFL teams, and coaches. It really is the best chance to see these guys. Obviously we've watched months of film of all these players, but this is the chance. Like, all right, how do you stack up against the best of the best in real football situations? So in that regard, if you have any interest in scouting and the draft process as a whole, I would certainly encourage you to go. It definitely felt a little lighter in terms of attendance. I think that was a weather thing more than anything else. But it's still a great time. Get to see all the draft professors that I usually only see virtually. Got to meet actually some of them in person for the first time, which was great. So yeah, it's truly it's an awesome experience, one of a kind experience. And I would encourage anyone, even if you're not interested in the draft, you just love football, take a trip down there and just watch the guys go at it. There's a big crowd, people, local people turn out to watch the practices and they get hype as hell. So it's a good time for sure.
So, what do you look for then? Because, like, as you said, it's a lot of it's practices, so it's one on one. These players are interacting. They're trying to go through the motions, but qu defensive players aren't allowed to hit the quarterback. You don't want anybody getting really hit because nobody wants to get injured. Everything's very basic. So when you're doing your stuff at the Senior Bowl, like, how do you grade players when it's like, okay, you try to do one-on-one drills, but football's a game of 11 people on the field at one time. So how do you, I guess, evaluate players? You're trying to figure out, okay, can they play in the NFL or do they just good in workouts?
Yeah, and to piggyback on that point, I think everyone would agree that tape is king, right? The months of film that I referenced before, like that's still what you should base any evaluation on for the most part. The Senior Bowl and the other bowl games and the combine, that's sort of like the extra layering on what the basis of your evaluation is. I think when you're at the Senior Bowl, I think what you're looking for is again, how these guys have prepared for the Senior Bowl is a key thing for me. If guys have, maybe, for example, if there's a pass rusher that, you want to see him add moves to his repertoire, and then he comes to the Senior Bowl and you see him do a spin move that he's never done before, or a two-hand swipe move that he's never done before. And that's something that you say, okay, well maybe, we see that you're working to get better and we see that you're adding to your skill set. It's the same with wide receivers. If you have a guy that, you know, you're you like a lot, but you maybe think his releases aren't that great off the line of scrimmage, and then you see him in the one-on-ones and his releases look better than you saw. That's something to consider, and that can help boost his stock. A lot of these, listen, a lot of these one-on-one drills have inherent, positions that will be favored in a rep and positions that won't be favored. Cornerbacks and offensive linemen are usually at a disadvantage on in the one-on-one reps, and so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt as well. But I think again, it just gives these players a chance to put themselves in a position where they're going every rep, every snap, everything they do is against guys that are also going to be playing on Sundays, and that's just not something you get, throughout, the months of the college football season. And you think about, especially for the small school guys, Gray Zabel is the premier example from last year. Coming in from North Dakota State, had one of the best Senior Bowl weeks of anyone that was in Mobile last year. Wound up being a first round pick, where I don't think prior to the Senior Bowl really anyone was talking about him as a first round pick. So that's kind of the impact that the Senior Bowl can have. But you at the same time you don't want to get too carried away with what you see after just 3 days of practice.
So I'm guessing you got to interact with other team scouts, other draft professors, other analysts there. Like, what are you hearing in terms of like the difficulty they're scouting players? Because, a lot of these offensive systems are the same thing. It's read option, a lot of RPOs. NFL will sort of still like, some teams do it, some teams like, no, no, no. You see a lot of teams that are very just quarterback gets it out quickly the first target, then he runs. I mean, when you're talking to scouts, do they ever say like, yeah, it's getting tougher to scout offensive linemen, quarterbacks, player X because what they're doing in college doesn't translate to the NFL?
Yeah, and I mean, when you were making that point too, I mean, the first thing I was thinking of was the quarterbacks, because a lot of even during the practices, I think I and others were kind of feeling like, okay, let's take the training wheels off a little bit. Like there were the goal of the Senior Bowl, I think one of them, at least for quarterbacks, is how you are going to operate and command an NFL offense. And I think eventually it kind of got there, but it did feel after like 1 or 2 days like, okay, we're keeping it pretty simple. There's some read option plays. There's some rollouts. Some sort of easy completions. You kind of and not that the Senior Bowl's not quarterback is one of the positions that I think the Senior Bowl doesn't really accentuate and highlight as much in terms of what you're going to get from a draft evaluation on a player. But it did feel like there was a little bit of slowness in terms of how they were treated. And to your point about the offensive linemen, it felt like, and that's kind of again, like when I talk about they have a disadvantage in the one-on-ones, it's a lot of these guys, you know, a lot of these pass rushers, when you were watching the one-on-ones, rely on bull rush. Like I'm just gonna try to run through you. There were a lot of guys that didn't really try a lot of moves as much as at least I would have liked. So these offensive linemen, as long as you can anchor down and stop a bull rush, you basically won the rep. And it's kind of like, well, that's not going to be quite as simple in the NFL. You are going to need to hold down your block and deal with not just top end athletes, but also guys that, have spent years on their craft and will have added moves to their arsenal and adapted these pass rush plans and will also adapt even in games to what you're doing and make their own adjustments, in a one-on-one situation where you're going every, fifth or sixth rep, you don't really need to like think about it that from that level of advancement. So, um, there is a simplicity issue that I think was sort of there at the Senior Bowl. Um, but that's kind of why too you kind of just have to look for the traits that you want to see and the improvement that you want to see in players from what you saw on film. I think those are the two big things that I look for, and at least inspire me potentially to even just go back and watch tape and make me think, okay, maybe I didn't give them enough credit in this area or that area. So that's sort of what I think the Senior Bowl is most useful for.
I know you have opinions on certain players. I know right now online it's like hey, you said that hey, you're surprised, a lot more people are hiring Michaela Proctor than you are. When you're talking to the scouts, do you ever how many players did you like grade where either you went, wow, they have this guy a lot, a lot lower than I do, or wow, they have this guy a lot higher than I do. Like, how many guys have you talked to, whether other draft, people like yourself to even NFL scouts where you were like, okay, what are you seeing that I don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, a player like Caden Proctor, for example, like I think he's pretty polarizing as a prospect, and by and large, um, I think there are the sect of people that will say, you know, mammoth of a man, overwhelming power, wins in a phone booth pretty much always, but also has a decent amount of foot speed and athleticism for as big as he is. Um, and so we'll kind of give him a benefit of the doubt, whereas I'm more on the pessimistic side because I see someone who just cannot handle an inside counter move and finds himself, overstepping because of how big he is and how, he has good foot speed for his size. That doesn't make it overall good foot speed. So sometimes he'll try to overstep off the line of scrimmage to sort of mitigate that. But in the NFL, you are going to have a lot of really fast, explosive edge rushers that will be able to just, you know, move to the inside and beat you there if you overextend. Um, but at the same time, too, then you don't want to give up your outside shoulder so easily, which I think Proctor is also susceptible to do. So, there's always going to be some polarization and some just natural disagreement on players. Um, I would actually say I don't really think I'm that
Oh, I'm saying I'm
far
not just
off.
I'm not even about Caleb Proctor. I'm just saying in general, like how many players, were you going to scouts and saying, "Oh, wow, you have much higher than I do," or "Wow, you have this guy much lower than I do." Like, are there a lot of players where you would find like almost like tastes great, last feeling like at the Senior Bowl? Like how many players did you with scouts have like just different opinions on?
I mean, I think we all kind of have different opinions. I don't think there's really any, that's kind of the thing with this class is guys that there's a lot of guys you can poke holes in if you really try, but somebody's got to go in the first round, and teams have to draft somebody. So it's sort of it always depends on what you value and what you believe the long-term upside of a player is. I mean, like Cole Payton is a great example where I'm, notoriously higher on him than pretty much everybody else because I'm willing to bet on the person and the arm and the running ability, and in particularly in this quarterback class that is I think most people would all agree is not good. Um, but it's what you value and what you're willing to bet on. For a lot of people, it's Garrett Nussmeier who had, I'd probably even say had the best Senior Bowl week of the quarterbacks. Um, I still think he's a late day two guy. Um, which isn't really not that much different from what it was before the Senior Bowl. But I think there are people now who are saying, okay, if he's healthy and he plays like and he can play like he played in the Clemson game in week one, maybe he should get, top 50 and potentially even a first round look. Ty Simpson is another example. I also think Ty Simpson is a late day two. He has a late day two grade from me. There's plenty of mock drafts that have him going, 13 to the Rams or 20, I think it's 21 to the Steelers. Um, so it's because people are willing to bet on, okay, well, this kid in the first half of the season was great, and we know that he's a great processor, and the natural physical limitations don't really worry us because we're willing to bet on how smart he is and how adept he is at being able to work the middle of the field. So I think there's always polarization with players. Um, I don't I don't think there's any like egregiously, like I don't think I can have an example of someone who like has a first round grade, on one end, and then I would turn around and say no is like a day three guy or vice versa. Um, yeah, honestly, Caden Proctor might be the the closest or one of the closest to that. Um, but there's definitely, I think particularly with the quarterback class, there's some dispute. Um, and again, that's just kind of because the quarterback class is tough to navigate. Um, I would say also too, it feels like the defensive tackle group, there's a little disparity in terms of, like Caleb Banks feels like a guy that, again, are you going to bet on the freakish traits and athleticism of a 335-pound man? Or are you going to worry about the foot injury and you're going to worry about the lack of production and you're going to worry about the lack of snaps? So he's another one that I think might have some, when final big boards come out, you might see some a decent range on him. Um, but yeah, I think there's again always natural polarization, but there's definitely a few wild cards in this class.
So I'll start with one of the first ones. That is Garrett Nussmeier. He feels like somebody that maybe 20 years ago he's guaranteed first round pick. Smart as hell, good arm, um, coach's son, so he knows how to play the position. He is somebody who you can argue has played at a high elite level. So hey, it's going to be a little bit easier. You look at these impressive touch late, layering pass between defenders. He's tough and gritty, commands respect. And then the weaknesses are, well, he's 6'1", 200 pounds. Well, he's not the most athletic guy. He you know can be over aggressive, hunting for big plays. It's safe to say that for him, unfortunately, the NFL sort of like bypassed his kind. Like he is, you could argue, an Andy Dalton slash Mac Jones quarterback, and in the NFL now, it's well, you need a Drake May, you need a Patrick Mahomes, you need a Sam Darnold, somebody who can do more than just stand in the pocket. You need a complete athlete. Does that summarize Nussmeier's problem right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said is fair. It kind of just depends on, do you believe that Garrett Nussmeier has enough physical upside to be a long-term quality starter? Because I don't think you draft, you said it, like he's not an athlete, he's not big, he's not athletic, he's not going to win with, Josh Allen-esque throws downfield. or Lamar Jackson-esque running ability, or even like Patrick Mahomes kind of, scrambling and working outside the pocket. Like he is a tried and true pocket passer, and that's not even getting into the health side of it with him. And you mentioned like he's only 202 pounds, so his frame is going to be a question mark too if he starts taking some hits, which as a pocket passer kind of scares you. But you know, where do and I think if he gets in, if he gets in a system where, you know, he gets a good offensive line that can protect him and he is able to sort of be the point guard that can, look, read a defense, look, find an open guy and get the ball to him. Like that's what you want, and he can be successful in that. It's very Andy Dalton-esque. Um, but yeah, those kinds of quarterbacks just don't they're not. If you think of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now, besides Joe Burrow, how many of those quarterbacks are going to be these just true pocket passer, point guard, you know, read a defense, hike the ball, get the ball out kind of guy, but doesn't have again that physical upside. It's not a big group of quarterbacks that do that anymore. So that's why I see him as a again like mid to late day two, where you take him and you hope he could maybe be a stabilizing starter for your team, but I don't take him anticipating that he is going to be top 10 at the position and going to be a as Cam Newton would like to say, a game changer versus a game manager. I think Garrett Nussmeier is absolutely a game manager. And if that's the case, how high can that ceiling possibly be? I don't think it's that high. I mean, Andy Dalton, what? I think he won. Did he win a playoff game? I don't even think he did that.
No, but
Um,
Cincinnati Bengals never wins. So that's a whole different story for a different day. Like
yeah.
people I've heard say he could go higher because hey, it's the McVay Shanahan tree where hey dummy, just follow what we're gonna do. Here's the plays. We scripted them out, all 35 of them. We'll take care of you. And again, we've seen with you can put Sean Payton in there where could he go maybe to the Rams, to Arizona, to maybe even Pittsburgh in that first, second round window because they know, hey, he knows the plays. We don't have to worry about teaching him. We don't have to worry about developing him in terms of, taking the fire hose like they do with Cam Newton with Caleb Williams, shoving it down, going, okay, 50% of the plays we can use, 50% we can't because he doesn't understand them. Like, could you see him go higher just because teams look and go, well, we trust he can run an offense. We don't need him to be this, but with the McVay Shan tree, we just need a guy who can follow the system.
Yeah, well, and look, that's sort of I mean, that's basically the Brock Purdy formula. Obviously, Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. Garrett Nussmeier will not be the last pick in the draft, but that's the Purdy way that the 49ers have tried and almost won a Super Bowl with is we are going to build up, we can get a great roster around you. All you have to do is take care of the football, make a couple throws downfield a game that can keep the chains moving. Potentially, if we need you to make one or two clutch throws at the end of a football game, and that'll be enough. And that, again, it almost worked for Purdy, but that feels like an outlier because like that 49ers roster had like what, seven, eight Pro Bowlers on it back when the Pro Bowl mattered. Like it was, that was a lightning in a bottle kind of roster, and they still didn't get the job done. So again, if you're banking on a physically limited quarterback who is also, physically limited both as an athlete and as an arm talent guy, I would really be hesitant to do that. But if you're a team like the Rams and you know you have a fantastic roster, regardless of who the QB is, and all you need to worry about is just not turning the ball over and being able to, again, lead and command an offense. Nussmeier can do that. He showed the best command of all the quarterbacks in Mobile. He did the best job at leading the offense, showing poise in the pocket, being able to navigate the pocket. He actually, I knock his athleticism, but he actually made one nice throw where he stepped up in the pocket, moved out to his right, and delivered a nice sideline throw to Jacoby Lane for I think it was like 15 yards. Um, so he has that little bit of ability to move around, but it's not his strength. But yeah, if he goes to the right offense that works the offense around his skill set, then he can be successful. But if I'm taking a quarterback, particularly in the first round, I want to draft a quarterback that can make, chicken salad out of chicken shit as opposed to just kind of, deal with the shit.
All right. Good luck to anybody trying to pronounce this guy's name because the last name is just a pain in the rear end. Max Iheanachor. If I screw it up, I apologize. Do not come over to my house and toss my car around. Yes, he's that size where he can do that. He's a guy that I've started to see more people go, we're intrigued. And I've seen in Senior Bowl, reports by some people like he stood out. He did pretty well. They looked at the tape and went, ooh, he only is he's only a 2 year starter, but hey, look, he plays left tackle. He held his own with David Bailey. What did you see out of him during the Senior Bowl? And is he a guy that all of a sudden could be a lot like Arianti Ursary, Armand Membu, or Josh Connerly, where you don't know them, and then all of a sudden they could go as high as 10 or as low as the 27th pick because, hey, teams need left tackles, and this guy can play left tackle, and he's not too big.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say first, I've been floating. I think it's Iheanachor, but I've also heard multiple pronunciations. Um, but I've been potentially saying that he could be a first round pick for of before the Senior Bowl, like, at least for a couple months, um, because just the raw traits and athleticism that he has are exactly what you look for in an NFL tackle. Um, Now, that said, too, he was, I think, very clearly I think he was the best offensive tackle. I think pretty unanimously he was at least the offensive tackle that showed the most upside for, being a long-term, high end starter at the position. Um, this is a guy who is, again, measurables check out. He's 6'6", 6'6", 330, 34-inch arms. Um, 2 year starter, like you said, at Arizona State. Came over from junior college. He didn't even start playing football until junior college. Teen years, he was playing soccer and basketball. And he didn't even move to the U.S. until he was 13 from Nigeria. So, he's got a great backstory, very limited football experience, but for the amount of time he's played football, you see like really really impressive flashes. The game that I always go back to is against Texas Tech this year, where David Bailey and Romello Height basically had their way with every single offensive tackle that they went up against this year, including potentially two first rounders in Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu at Utah. And Ian Achor, not perfectly, but pretty largely handled Romello Height. Like pretty much kept him out of the backfield for most of the game. So it was a solid performance again from a guy who hasn't played a lot of football. it's a cliche at this point, but if he landed now, I was going to say landed at Stoutland University, but I don't even know where that is now because he's not with the Eagles. But if a guy like a Jeff Stoutland got his hands on Iheanachor, I believe he could be an all-pro tackle because I think the tools and the traits are there to be a great tackle. He literally just needs to learn how to like he needs to keep learning how to play football. And there's no reason to believe he can't do that. He just doesn't have the years of experience that pretty much anyone else would at this point in their career. So I'm a big fan of his. He had a great Senior Bowl week. I believe he's gonna go round one, and I think that's the belief. I don't think most people are as high on him as I am from a grade standpoint, but I think because the tackle class is also pretty weak by and large, um, and again, he seems like a great kid, impressed a lot of teams, got to put his ability on display. I think for those reasons, I'd be stunned if he fell out of the top 50. I think because how valuable good tackles are, or at least tackles with upside are in this class, I think he goes first round if I had to bet on it.
Could he go higher? I mean, that's because you keep hearing about the tackles. Well, Spencer Fanu, Caleb Lomo, they're kind of light, so they're gonna need to put on weight, and they might be
Mhm.
guards. You hear Maui, it's like, well, we're not sure about the arms, and he's only a right tackle, and he's not really great with speed rushers. And then you hear like even like Caleb Proctor's, Max Freeling. He seems to be the one guy where physically you're not going, well, he has short arms. Well, he's too heavy, or well, he's too light. And again, I know you don't have inside information. I know no, most NFL scouts won't tell you what's going on because, they're all going to, fib a lot because they're trying to play games. But am I nuts for thinking there's a world where he could go as high as number 12 to, no, or sorry, no, or as high as either 9 or 13 to either the Chiefs or even the Rams because you start looking going, well, this is what they want in tackles. And they go, ooh, this guy is it. There's not a lot of mileage. We don't have to worry about weight. We don't have to worry about short arms. We don't have to worry about him holding up because, hey, if you can hold up with David Bailey, you can hold up with a lot of NFL speed guys.
Yeah, look, I've learned to never say anything is impossible in the NFL draft. Teams will do some teams will do some things that will make you question everything. That said, I would still be very surprised if, as much as I like Iheanachor, I'd be pretty surprised if he went top 10. I do think the sense is Mawanoa from Miami and Spencer Fano are sort of the two kind of more solid bets in terms of what they're going to be in the NFL, as ironically enough, both right tackles, as is Iheanachor. Um, if you're looking for a left tackle, the conversation probably is Monroe Freeling at Georgia or Caleb Lomo from Utah. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of, I made the point earlier, like there is no there's no consensus tackle one. You can poke holes in every single tackle prospect that we just mentioned. And because of that, you have this scenario where it's really just going to come down to what teams, who teams feel will fit their culture in terms of just the team and the locker room, and also just the offensive scheme and their play style and things like that. Again, if I were to put money on it, I would believe that Mawanoa and Fano are top 15 locks. I would be shocked if either one of them fell past that, um, because of how valuable tackle is, and I do think they are just all around better prospects at this point, even though I do think Mawanoa is better at guard. Um, but again, if you're a team that wants to maybe bet a little more on upside, and a guy like Iheanachor who needs more development, but could be a better pure right tackle than a Fano or even a Mawanoa, maybe you do take that chance in the top 20. Um, I'm not gonna say it's impossible. Top 10 feels really rich. Um, but if you told me a team like Detroit, for example, really loved the kid and potentially wanted to, you know, get him in the room and then maybe eventually transition him to the left, in to replace Taylor Decker eventually down the road, and they kind of just wanted to give him like a year to develop and be able to switch sides and things like that. I don't think it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. So we'll see come draft time, but again, I would fully bet he goes first round. I would say mid to late teens is probably his ceiling.
All right. If Max was the guy we were sort of unsure about, this I think we all can agree he has made a lot of money the last couple of weeks. Lee Hunter from Texas Tech. Now it's just a question of how much money. You heard this before, like he popped during the college football playoff within his play against Oregon, where people are noticing like, ooh, that guy is pretty fast. Damn, he's explosive. He can make plays. And it wasn't like he was doing this during the regular season, but everybody paid attention to Bailey, Height, Rodriguez, and he sort of got like hidden. I've heard he's now defensive tackle too because he's been the most consistent guy of the last year. He popped during the Senior Bowl. He is that size that every defensive coordinator loves in their defensive tackles. What did you see from Hunter? And is he a guy that you now can say, yep, he's going first round? There's no question.
So I'll tell you first what I saw. He absolutely popped. A lot of the discussion on day two was, is anyone gonna leave? Because for those who don't know, that during the Senior Bowl practice week, if you are a guy that has a really impressive performance on day one or two, and you're a guy that's considered to be a you know potential first round player, you normally don't stay for every day of practice. You do your one or two great days, you show the scouts exactly what you want to show, and you pack it up and you move on and you go start your prep for the combine. So the talk on day two was, who, if anyone, is gonna has had a good enough performance after day one to warrant leaving early. And that player, again, nobody felt truly like, oh man, this is a top 10 player, so there's no reason he's be here. But if anyone was going to leave after day one, it probably would have been Lee Hunter. He was the best player on day one. He stayed all 3 days of practice, to his credit, and all 3 days of practice he looked good. Definitely had a rep or two that was not good. But I would say the overall reaction and imprint that he left was, this is a powerful, fast for his size, and he's a big man. He's 300, 6'4", 320, I think, in the measurables, and he looks every bit of that. Um, he is fast. His motor never stops. It is constantly running. He is constantly trying to get into the backfield and knock down whatever offensive lineman or blocker is in his way. So you love the energy that he plays with, and I think I think it's him. So I think he's entered the top three or four defensive tackle discussion. I think right now it's in some order, not necessarily my order, but I think it's Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, Lee Hunter, and Caden McDonald from Ohio State. Those are the four in some order that are going to be the top four defensive tackles in this draft. Do I think Lee Hunter is a first round lock? No, because I think defensive tackle, just in general, it's hard to be a first round defensive tackle. And I think given that I just gave you four names that are going to be contending for first round slots, I think there's a world where he is the odd man out, so to speak, and falls, to like top of day two. Do I think he deserves to be a first round pick? Yeah, I absolutely think. I think he is one of the top 30 best players in the class. I forget where I had him on my big board. He's in the 20s somewhere. Um, but again, really good football player. I would say a top 3 to 5 player, if not even higher, at the Senior Bowl, and he earned the right to contend for a first round slot. It will again just kind of come down to where does he fit on a defense, and how does he stack up to those other defensive tackles that I mentioned.
Like I've read even on NFL.com, he right now has launched himself to, dare I say, defensive tackle one because of he's much bigger. He had a great senior year, and that defense was phenomenal. That he's a lot more developed than other defensive tackles. There are no health issues. I mean, like when you add all this up, could you see him sneak in because teams are looking and go, well, we don't have to worry about any injury history. We don't have to worry about him not trying. We don't have to worry about him underperforming in a weak conference. We don't have to worry about him being raw as hell, which we could list for either Woods, McDonald, Daryl Jackson Jr., and Caleb Banks. Like, is there a sense where Lee Hunter goes higher because teams look and go, he is the most ready-made, safe defensive tackle of this class?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally a possible outcome. I think the only thing working against him really is just I don't think his athletic upside is quite as high as a Peter Woods or a Caleb Banks. I would say him and Caden McDonald are more comparable in that regard. Um, and again, too, I think it's just a kind of a fit conversation. I think Lee Hunter in the NFL is more of that one tech nose tackle kind of player that, you could potentially have working the B gap, but I think his most dominant place will be lining up above the center and just plugging up the middle of the defensive line. Whereas a guy like Peter Woods, for example, is I think more of that athletic 3 and even possibly 5 tech kind of defensive lineman that you'll see lining up in the more traditional defensive tackle spot, in between the guards, or potentially even over the tackle. That's, and different defenses like to do different things with their defensive linemen. So, teams aren't going to value Lee Hunter's skill set, the same way that they're going to value a guy like Peter Woods' skill set. So that's going to come into play too. But I think if a team needs a nose tackle and is worried about, I mentioned with Banks, like the foot and the lack of snaps and the lack of just polish as a pass rusher. And if you look at a guy like Caden McDonald, what is his pass rush upside, and does he have as much athleticism as we'd want? Would we rather bet on Lee Hunter than him? Yeah, I could certainly see that. It's kind of similar to Iheanachor, where I would be stunned if he was a top 10 pick. Um, but do I think he could sneak into the teens to the right team? Yeah, I could certainly see that happening again because the thing to kind of keep in mind too when we talk about these Senior Bowl guys, and then this is one of the other really good things about the Senior Bowl is it's not just about putting your football ability on display. That's obviously the main thing. But the other thing is you're meeting with these teams, you're interacting with coaches from these NFL teams, and you're interacting with the scouts and the representatives that come from all 32 teams in the NFL that come to Alabama, and you're meeting them and you're engaging them and you're building a rapport and a relationship with them. And there's plenty of examples of guys that get drafted by a team that they first, that the first interaction between the team and the player was the Senior Bowl. So, you know, in that regard, that's something that the Senior Bowl does well at facilitating. And that can certainly push a team to say, you know what? We have Lee Hunter and Caden McDonald pretty much graded the same in terms of their skill sets. But because, I met Lee Hunter and I know Lee Hunter's a good kid and he's a workhorse and he's gonna give his 110% every time, I'm gonna bet on him and we're gonna make it happen with him. So that's, again, something to keep in mind also. But just from a talent perspective, yeah, Lee Hunter could absolutely, again, go in top 20. I just worry about the positional value becoming a conversation with him.
This is the ultimate sort of, and I'll refer to Family Guy. Do you want the boat or the box? You know what the boat is? Box could be anything. It could be diamonds, winning the Powerball numbers, anything. That's Caleb Banks. I mean, and look, he did. I heard he also from multiple people. Caleb Banks was a standout in the Senior Bowl. He was wrecking people. You saw the freak athletic ability that you dreamed after his junior season. So he played 2 games his senior year. And granted, they were the last 2 games. I give him credit because he didn't have to come back. He could have just sat the rest of a year, like Jerron McCoy did, tried to heal up, but he gutted it out. But I guess here's a question for you. You personally, you are a GM. You see him. He is 6'6", 325. He's built a lot like Chris Jones. He moves a lot like Chris Jones. Would if where do you take him right now? I mean, is he a first round pick? Is he a fourth round pick? Where does Caleb Banks fit? Unless if you don't know the medicals.
Well, yeah, so that was the point I was going to make too. If you're asking me in a vacuum, assuming he's, the health isn't something I'm seriously worried about, and you're just asking me to, put a grade on the player and their upside and what I would be willing to spend, I think Caleb Banks is a top 10 player. And I think that because he has rare, and I mean very rare, physical traits. He is 6'6", 335 pounds with 35-inch arms. And on top of that, I think he is I think he has an exceptional first step for a man who is that large. I think he, for someone who is 6'6", doesn't always have the issue of, you think of a naturally high pad level that leaves you susceptible to losing the leverage battle often. He has the ability to get flexible and to not be so high and so tall that he just gets, basically forklifted. He has both the power and the flexibility to not have that happen, and that allows him to sustain, on the in usually at the as a one tech kind of position. And that allows him to, use that power that he has and just hold the point of attack and basically shut down any run up the middle or be able to even drive back offensive linemen and push the pocket as a pass rusher. Now, he sort of did it inversely Hunter, where his first day was actually his worst day. Did not play well, got kind of locked down a couple times, and that was mainly because he doesn't have a strong pass rush repertoire yet. And I think that's in part at least because he just hasn't played a lot of snaps between the injury and rotating on Florida's defense. Like he just hasn't taken a lot of snaps and he needs to get more snaps. When day two and day three rolled around, and I think he picked up on the sense that he had a bad day one and people thought he had a bad day one, he was verbally angry and was very much trash talking and letting it be known that he was not going to accept that result again. And when he played mad, he he was dominating. He was dominating on multiple reps. And still had some losses, but showed how much of a force he could be in the middle. I mean, you think of like what Vita Vea is for the Bucks. You brought up Chris Jones too. Like he can be that kind of defensive tackle slash nose tackle. The question is, how much coaching up is he going to need? Is he going to be healthy enough to get that coaching up? And what is his upside really as a pass rusher, or is he just a run stuffing nose tackle? Because of what I saw on days two and three, and what I saw, I loved him over the summer too. I loved the upside, and I saw the vision for him. So I personally would bet on him with a top 10 pick. When I did my mock draft after the Senior Bowl, I mocked him 9 to the Chiefs because I think if you give him a mentor like Chris Jones to learn and to, improve his skill set and improve his technique and things like that, he can dominate. So I would bet on him with that high of a pick. I will understand if teams in the top 10/15 are wary and decide to go elsewhere. I don't think he gets out of the top 20. I think he's too physically gifted and too unless there's a serious medical thing that arises later on that I just don't know about right now. But as I sit here today, I would be shocked if he falls out of the top 20.
That's the question, and look, when I was doing this stuff with draft professors, by the way, shout out to Jim Wilkins does a fantastic job. It's man, and yeah, I want to know the medicals because again, and I get it. This could be, he's a big man, 6'6", 330 pounds, 335 probably if he had a couple cheeseburgers. And you look and you go, okay, is a foot injury? Is this going to be recurring? Is this going to be something that affects him long term? I mean, look, we've seen basketball players have problems that end their careers early, and this guy is a lot heavier than a basketball player. The flip side is, how many GMs right now are kicking themselves, going, could have had Trey Smith. Our doctor said no. And look at those Chiefs. They stole him. He's a Pro Bowl, 2 Super Bowl rings, one of the best guards, and all because, they trusted their medical doctors. We did. Oh my God, we're kicking ourselves right in the rear end. How much if you are a GM, do you have to, like really focus on the medicals and decide, okay, is he worth this? Because again, it's the foot injury. I know we don't have it, but from your speculation, how much is the NFL Combine going to be big for him in terms of showing teams, look, this isn't. I didn't have a screw put in my foot. I didn't have any multiple surgeries for ligaments. I'm fine. Like, how much does he need to massage teams? Like, I'm healthy, and they're not going. Yeah, we're worried you're going to be lasting 3 years and you're out of the league due to foot problems.
Yeah, look, I'm never gonna say, just ignore the medicals, don't worry about it. Like, obviously that's something that teams need to be wary of and to be cognizant of when they make these picks. We've seen, unfortunate examples of guys, with I think with a lot of upside, drafted in the first or second round or whatever, and those medical issues catch up with them. So I'm not going to sit here and say don't don't think about it, just take the player. I do think by an overall, in the grand scheme of medical questions surrounding draft prospects, I think it's a little overblown. Um, I think like to Will Johnson, for example, last year, where he fell to what, 48 to Arizona, when I think pretty much the large consensus was this is the best corner in the draft, and he fell to 48 because he had like this nagging lower leg injury or whatever it was. We didn't even really know what it was because Michigan wouldn't tell us. So like because of that mystery, and I presume this is why he fell, teams were like, let's look elsewhere, let's let him fall. And it's only 1 year, but he's looked very much like a guy that should have gone in the first round, as we all kind of thought he was to begin with. So that's another example of a guy getting sort of overthought because of a quote unquote medical issue. For Banks, I think he also has the benefit of he did come back from the foot injury and played. He didn't play a lot, and he obviously didn't play a full season, but at least you have, okay, he had this injury, but he came back and he played well. So it's not like, Jermod McCoy literally hasn't played football in basically 2 years. So, like, we have to kind of take that into consideration, I think, more than Banks. But if a team, if a doctor, goes to a team and says, listen, this guy's, we're concerned about his lower body and how sustainable it is, you take that seriously, but you also have to weigh it with, okay, but are we going to let a guy who we believe is potentially an all-pro defensive tackle, if you think that, like I think he could be, or if he fell to the second round at pick 35 or whatever, I'm not hesitating. I don't care if he's, he if I will run the risk that he plays one snap and shatters his foot and never plays football again, if there's a chance that I could get an elite defensive tackle in the second round.
All right. So this week, this Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, it's going to be the New England Patriots versus the Seattle Seahawks. We'll get to your prediction later on, but when you look at these two teams, how much is it sort of basically the two choices. You can either A, just get the quarterback and then build around him quickly, like the Patriots did, or you do the rant where you do Seattle, which is, hey, we build a team, then we find the quarterback, we put him in, and yeah, then we're set. Take me to Seattle. Like when you look at this team, how much of it is based on just they drafted well, they stockpiled players, and then when the quarterback came in the market, they were ready to pounce.
Yeah, I listen, if you ask me to name a better general manager than John Schneider, I would struggle, and I know damn well that Howie Roseman exists, and I know that Les Snead exists for the Rams, and like I know there are great GMs out there, but I think John Schneider, time and time again, has understood when his team needed to make a change and executed making necessary changes at an exceptionally high level. I mean, he's been there literally since the Legion of Boom when they won the Super Bowl, a decade ago. Like he understands, and I could go back to the Russell Wilson trade and how well that aged. I think for Seattle, that probably is sort of the foundation of what we see now with Seattle. Um, and obviously, picking guys like JSN when people questioned that pick because they had DK Metcalf, and they had Tyler Lockett, and people thought, oh, you're gonna add another smaller receiver, uh, to your team here. Why are you gonna do that? Well, now Jackson Smith and Jigba is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, or at least this season was. Um, you look at what they've done, bringing in guys like Leonard Williams, bringing in guys like DeMarcus Lawrence to really shore up that defensive line. Um, and obviously too, like the secondary has been built up, and Mike Macdonald has really, I think elevated that defense too with just his impressive coaching ability. Um, and obviously, I point out like hiring Mike McDonald was a, stroke of genius, it seems. Um, but like understanding the thing that I think Seattle has done better than just about any team, and it's showing, is understanding their own system and their own style and their own identity, and finding players through the draft and free agency and trades and whatever, and just building a roster that caters to exactly what they need. Oh, we need a guard, we need an interior offensive lineman that can win consistently in outside zone concepts. Go draft Gray Zabel at 18. Everyone said it was a perfect fit at the time, and guess what? It's been a perfect fit. Oh, we need uh a do-it-all uh box safety that can, win, that can basically just line up wherever Mike McDonald wants to put him, and is so, athletic and physical enough that he can perform a variety of roles in Mike McDonald's defense. Oh, let's draft Nicky Manwari. And Nicky Manwari, when people were worried about, his potential transition to the NFL, has looked like $1 million. So the John Schneider, Mike McDonald pairing has done a phenomenal job. And obviously, like, the understanding of bringing in Sam Darnold, moving on from Geno Smith. And I'm not gonna. I genuinely believe Geno Smith has been put in maybe the worst situation for a quarterback besides the Jets and the Browns, probably. I don't think his bad season is necessarily completely indicative of his ability as a quarterback. But it's obvious though that Darnold was an upgrade, and giving themselves, when he became available through Minnesota's, in hindsight, poor decision making, they snapped and they made it clear that Darnold was their guy, and exactly how they wanted to build this offense was exactly the kind of skills was going to match well with exactly the kind of skill set that Sam Darnold brings to the table. And again, it was just that forward thinking of, I don't think anyone thought the Seahawks would be this good, would be in contention for a Super Bowl, and would have had a better record than both Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. So that is a credit again to the Schneider's, masterminding of the system, McDonald's impressive coaching job, and these players buying in to this system and this way of of operating, and they are very much on the doorstep of being Super Bowl champions because of it.
Patriots in their hand. They get the quarterback. They luck out. They suck for. They tank for Caleb May or Jaden. They get one of those three. Drake May. They struggle for a year, then they fire him, bring in a new coach, and Vrabel signs a lot of free agents, drafts a couple kids who have played well. Is this sustainable, or is this for is this sort of like the outlier in terms of the Patriots, where like Washington last year, you just get the quarterback, he can elevate, and just you bring in a lot of veterans, guys like Garrett Bradbury, guys like Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins. You sign Milton Williams to a big deal. You bring in Carlton Davis and Harold Landry, Kayvon Chase on, and then you just you luck in and find the perfect coach at the perfect time.
Yeah, I mean, well, to your first question, is it sustainable? Yeah, as long as Mike Vrabel's head coach and Drake May's the quarterback, the Patriots' success will absolutely be sustainable. Anytime you have, at least top five, talents at the two most important parts of any football team, coach and quarterback, you've cemented at least for the next decade that you will be, in the mix. Um, I came into the year expecting the Patriots to do well, not be in the Super Bowl, but I I bought into Vrabel overhauling the defense, which he did. I think in part two because it just felt that Gerard Mayo was just not at all equipped to be a head coach, and we knew that Mike Vrabel very much was. Um, so the job that Vrabel did with this defense, getting guys to just step up so much in throughout the season and in the playoffs in particular, the Marcus Jones of the world, Craig Woodson, the rookie safety from Cal, like they are getting contributions, from guys that would have thought were depth pieces, key contributions. And and obviously, like when you have Drake May, a great quarterback can cover up a lot of flaws. I still think this offensive line isn't great, but it's played better than I think we all kind of would have thought coming into the year. Will Campbell hasn't looked awesome in the past couple games, to say the least, but you have to at least appreciate the fact that he upgraded what was seen by many as the worst offensive line in the NFL a year ago, and he helped at least somewhat solidify it, and solidify it enough to where Drake May is able to be a MVP candidate at this point. Um, and I mean the receivers are, yeah, again, they're doing enough. The yeah, Diggs and Booty and Hollins, like they're doing enough to get some production out of the passing game and not just Drake May trying to just throw up a ball and pray. Um, I don't. Do I think that, is that sustainable in the sense that like Drake May can just keep, thriving while his number one receiver is Stephon Diggs and he's, Kayshon Boutte and Mac Hollins are the best targets he has? No, probably not. It feels, that's kind of what Josh Allen's going through right now in Buffalo, where he just doesn't have the receiving options that you would want for him to have. But in terms of the overall, like, do I unfortunately expect now the Patriots to be like a 10-win team at least every single year, basically for the next decade? Yeah, unless something happens to Drake May, God forbid, or something happens to Mike Vrabel. Um, this is going to be a good football team for as long as Vrabel and Drake May are in the building. Um, they have a tough task in front of them with Seattle, but Drake May is playing at a high level that if he does what he did in the regular season in the Super Bowl, that's going to be tough for Seattle to deal with.
So who wins? Because this is like this feels like last year where everybody's like coach quarterback. Hey, Chiefs have the advantage. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid versus Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Oh my God, that's a mismatch. Rest of the
Uh,
roster, everybody thought Eagles had the better roster. They had the better defense, they had the better offense, the pieces, and we saw what happened. It was team beats coach quarterback. So who wins this? Drake May and Mike Vrabel, they are you could say they're better than Seattle's Mike McDonald, Sam Darnold, or does Seattle, because they have talent on both offense, defense, there's no real weakness, their special teams is killer. Do they overcome a flawed Patriots team that, as you said, if Drake May ain't playing well, they're not going to score points at all?
yeah, I think generally when I pick a Super Bowl, I lean on the quarterback position. And usually it works out. Not every year, obviously, but I think generally the best quarterback performance winds up winning the Super Bowl. Um, Now that said, this I struggle because I don't particularly trust either of these quarterbacks fully, and that's really only because I haven't seen either of them even remotely close to this position ever in their very young careers. I mean, obviously Darnold's been in the league a bit longer than Drake May has, but neither one of them had even been in a conference championship game. Drake May hadn't even been in the playoffs before this year. So, like, I can't really sit here and say like, I would willingly bet on Drake May to play well, or I'd willingly bet on Sam Darnold to play well. There's a reasonable world where either of them have bad games. So, it from approaching it from that perspective, I think if you exclude the quarterbacks, I think Seattle's roster is just better in pretty much every facet. So, from that perspective, I have to pick Seattle. And also too, because I don't think my sanity would survive if I had to pick a Patriots Super Bowl win. Um, but I do think Seattle's the better team. I think Seattle is has more ways of winning this football game than the Patriots do. So based on that, I'm gonna pick the Seahawks, and I would pick them to win. Probably, I think the spread is 4.5. Last I saw, I would I would take Seahawks with the points.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we love having him on the show. I give you from a draft professors and from his own Substack and NFL draft coverage. I give you Anthony Russo. So, Anthony, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is he? Twitter, the Substack, probably YouTube or Rumble channel. Where can fans hit you up at?
Yeah, I can always find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. I've got my Substack there, which you can find on my X profile. But I've put out my top 150 big board post Senior Bowl. It'll be the last big board I put out until probably April, right before the draft. So you can find that on my Substack. I'll be on Draft Professor podcasts at some point in the near future. I think I'm gonna be doing Sunday nights going forward. But you can find me on there, and just honestly just check the Draft Professor podcast out in general. And yeah, and I'm always, my X is where I'm most active and tweeting about prospects and whatever nonsense the Jets are doing every day. So that's where you can find me the most active.
Anthony Russo, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure to have you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here. Only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.